It's now a great pleasure to have an opportunity to listen to Dr. Iraj Abedian. Dr. Iraj is founder and chief executive of Pan-African Capital Holdings, a private equity investment house. He's a professor of economics at the University of Cape Town, and he was a professor of economics at the University of Cape Town before entering into the business sector. In January of 2000, he joined Standard Bank Group at the head office in Johannesburg as the group chief economist. He was appointed director group chief group economist in April of 2000 and was a member of the Standard Bank Exco. In March of 2015, he became honorary professor of economics at the Graduate School of Business at the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University in Port Elizabeth. And he currently serves on the following boards. He's chairman of the Fortress Income Fund. He's chairman of the board for African Marine Solutions. He's chairman of the board for Interfruits. He's also a member of the advisory board to the Auditor General of the South African government. Iraj's much published resignation from the board of directors of Munich Re South Africa. It's placed him in the limelight as an outspoken professional who is concerned about ethics and the current challenges being experienced with state capture and the whole situation with KPMG. I'd like to welcome you to the floor. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you for inviting me here. Good evening, everybody. After Graham's riveting tax discussion, my discussion is going to be boring on economic issues, but let's start, given that the day is getting too long and a lot of us are getting tired. I'm going to share with you some broad economic, my understanding of the political economy of South Africa. For those of you who may have not noticed, I subtitled it An Oblivious Government and Economy on the Brink. And that's really what I believe is to be kind, is what we can, or the way we can describe our government. If you want to be a bit more possibly realistic and more analytical, it would be a destructive government, not an oblivious government. But I've tried to be diplomatic. These days, my friends ask me, have you got security? Have you been threatened? I said, for what? It's a dangerous crowd you're tackling. We're talking about, I've got no security, I've got no money to buy security, nor do I intend going that route. And if a society gets so bad that talking ethics puts you at risk, then I have a big problem with auditors and accountants. So but South African economic growth, we all know it's really fragile. You're averaging of, I think, talking about 0.5% or 1% is our visual thinking at the moment. If we grow anything positive, at best 0.3 or 0.5%, it would be almost miraculous. But we cannot expect anything else from an economy that its two pillars, investors and consumers, have lost confidence. At the moment, my day job is not economics, my day job is private equity and having exposure to various sectors. It's literally frightening to see how all sectors, all businesses are in a very uncertain, very doubtful, and at times volatile state of mind. And then you expect them to commit investment for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and it's just not rational. And of course, everybody, as we talk later, says, okay, well, maybe I should just sit on my hand, as they say, until December comes and goes. And then we pray in the meantime as to what will happen. So at the moment, the economy on the business side, on the investment side, is in a state of what at best may be called a holding pattern. Just sit there, pray, hope that December will bring some positive news. But that's not the way to run an economy. Because the rest of the world is not waiting for us to sort out our issues for the December counting goes. So our economy is in that space. Thank God, drought for most of the country except the Western Cape has broken, so at least agriculture is back into production. Agriculture and agri-businesses are the only performing sectors at the moment because of the global commodity prices. Global food prices are good. And in general, if you're a business that has rand cost and other currencies revenue, you're in a good space. So believe it or not, from an economic point of view, not from a psychological point of view, from a pure economic business point of view, the South African economy is not in a bad space. It's just got a rotten government and a lot of rotten businesses that support and withhold the government. That's been captured by a lot of so-called business. That's it. The structure of the economy is not vulnerable or is not engaged in negative environment. Commodity prices are rising, the global economy is actually growing on average from a low base. Europe is in the positive, Japan is in the positive, the United States, despite Trump, is growing, and so on and so forth. So from that point of view, our economy is not in a bad space. I had a fellow economist who, in the 1980s, late 80s, 2 terms was the Minister of Finance of Brazil. And I spent a short space, about 6 months at the IMF, working on a project, and he was having a lunchtime chat. He wrote a book subsequently, and his book starts with the following, which at that time I thought it was funny for an economist to write this thing. But he says when God was created the earth, that he had all the angels of different kinds around him, or her, if God is female, so, and said they were sitting and having a sort of panoramic helicopter view of the earth, and the goddess of gold would say, okay, put some in Ghana, some South Africa, some Brazil. Goddess of forest, put some in here, put there, desert here, and then every allocation, so to speak, of good things, mineral, arable land, agriculture, rivers, forests, Brazil got a bit, and the goddess of justice got a bit fed up. So, I'm getting a little bit concerned. You're allocating disproportionately to this part of the world which is called Brazil. Too much of everything, disproportionate. God said, wait until I allocate people. Will compensate. So South Africa landed up in the same position. Got everything, but wait until they allocate people. So the economy is suffering under the people, our nations, call it kindly shenanigans. And these shenanigans are by no stretch of imagination confined to government. Nor, and I'm not an apologist for the last 10 years, which has been dreadful, there's a lot of structural issues that we have to deal with. Yes, our biggest problem at the moment is the state capture and the corruption that has become like a cancer spreading through every node of our society, but there are other issues that this economy as a society we have to deal with, but that are linked to powers to be in there. Private sector remains the only driver of hope of driving the economy for the next 10 years. Because Grant showed you that gap between revenue and government expenditure. If you then convert that to what has happened to our public debt over the past 8 years, it has doubled. If you then look at what has happened to the debt service on the part of public debt, it's the fastest growing item of our budget. It used to be wages and salaries and welfare. It's now the top item of budgetary spend. These are huge, huge challenges for an economy that has growth of close to 0%. And the Ministry of Finance and the Cabinet is totally oblivious to what it takes, and is totally both incompetent and corrupt. And you have that combination. I submit even you put the most competent people at the Treasury and within the Cabinet, it will take them 5 to 7 years to rebalance, put us into what we call it technically a fiscally sustainable macroeconomic picture. And the chances of that happening in the next 3 years is pretty zero. So, if you look at it from a macroeconomic point of view, the only hope of this economy pulling itself out of the ditch that we are in is the private sector. And to me, that's a good thing. If you had a government that was corrupt, incompetent, and well-resourced, then you have a big problem. Yeah? But if you have a government that's incompetent and corrupt and there's nothing to work with, they are very constrained. And at the moment, Minister Gigawa's problem is exactly that. He came to the cabinet thinking that I'm the Minister of Finance and I can do what I want. When he got his briefing, he was told that there's nothing here to do anything with. Because the economy is not growing to generate taxes, and if you want to borrow, you have to deal with the capital market. That if you think white monopoly capital is bad, to talk to a few portfolio managers who you have to go to them, they don't come to you, and they don't understand your language, and they don't care a damn about you. They only care about whether you can pay them back at the rate that they want. And the more you talk nonsense, the more at the end of the meeting they say, well, the premium that you want is not 25 basis points, it's 350 basis points. Do you want or shall we go? And they don't have time to waste. So Minister Gigawa is on a very steep learning curve, and he will come down. Watch this space, his suit will change, his language will change. Whether he'll have time to change his politics, that I'm not sure. But he will have to change, and change quite dramatically. Be as it may, in the global context, and this is for those of you who feel very depressed by looking at the conditions in the global context in the emerging markets, the comparative advantage of South Africa is not its people, it's not its resources, it's the strength of its private sector relative to the total economy. And that has been the saving grace of South African political economy, both under apartheid and post-apartheid. And I'm quite convinced that in the next few years, as the private sector learns how to behave, how to conduct itself, and how to use its muscles within a constitutional democracy, that will gradually improve the economy back. You have seen already that businesses are beginning to act differently, they talk differently. Never ever under colonialism or under apartheid did we have business people looking into the eyes of the president and saying, you're a thief. That wasn't something that business would do. For some reason, German would do it, the French do it daily, but in South Africa, it was very unbusinesslike. But if you want to live under constitutional democracy, you've got to do what the constitutional democracy requires, which means business as the most important element of the society, as the engine of economic growth and prosperity. It has to stop being sheepish, it has to be a real social stakeholder. And that we see happening slowly. So we have a political turmoil. December will come. Post-December, the question will be what happened in January. January will be what happened in that. It is a cycle, and then when all of that settles, all of the analysts will say, well, what happened in 2019? Now that we know what's happened to the ANC, that doesn't tell us much. The real challenge is going to be 2019. However we cut and paste it, I submit, and I'm not a political analyst, but I take interest as a student of economics, to find comparators for our society. And the best that I can offer is Germany. We are at best, there's no perfect example, but Germany is the only sort of socio-economic configuration that we can use as a benchmark. So we need to prepare ourselves for learning how to live under a constitutional democracy with a government of coalition. Because no grouping in the South African society is going to be dominant. You have too much disparities of income, not just along race, but you also have tribal issues, you have issues of race, and not just black and white. Others, when a society is so diverse and so intellectually, emotionally, what we call it, heterogeneous, so I'm trying to find a better term that doesn't sound too snobbish, but that's the language of economics. In other words, we are not homogeneous, we are not consistent, we don't relate to each other. And I bet if you think it's them that's the problem, in this very room, if we start one issue amongst all the rich and educated that you are here, you will not agree on whether we should have wealth tax or not. And that's the problem of diverse societies. Diverse societies ultimately end up with some form of coalition, but we have no culture there with governance of coalition. So we have a lot of learning to do, have to be democratic. So I'm saying in a complicated way, prepare yourself for a lot of living in different conditions than our parents and some of us are used to. And don't be nervous. That's just part of the new global organization. In this situation, what was up to now, the strength of the South African political economy was that the ANC was the dominant party. Everybody knew it, and ANC pretty much decides how South Africa is, the capital market likes it, the investors like it, everybody who wants to come to South Africa likes it, because you know what to expect. But when this anchor of stability suddenly shatters into pieces, and it loses its own coherence and cohesion and identity, therefore the very source of stability becomes a source of instability, fear, volatility, uncertainty, and all the nasty things that analysts were telling us. And this is the violence that we sort of, this wasn't the way I structured it, but the LCD or the paradigm. So up to now, as you know, there is a contestation increasing these three poles. Ramaphosa, Nkosazana Zuma, and Zweli Mkhize. We'll come back to that. Our state of the economy growth, our estimate is 0.5%. This is our group, Pan African Investment and Research. I've got two companies, one does private equity, one does the strategic research of where we should and we shouldn't invest, why we shouldn't and we shouldn't. So that's my research company. Our estimate as of September is about 0.5% for this year. IMF still, as of July, although they're revising this down, and World Bank is about just about the same. This is the index of policy uncertainty, which we all know, but this is possibly what's the most worrying part for an economist. If an economy does not invest now, next year and the year after and the year after, you're not going to have growth momentum. And any growth that comes along, it's what we call it base effect. Because last year the growth was so low, next year if you get a little bit, it's going to be an arithmetic growth. It's not going to be a job creating, wealth creating, prosperity creating growth. The part that obviously is most concerning is that for the reasons that I mentioned, a fixed investment or investment in new ventures has basically averaged below zero. And it's getting less and less and less. Private sector credit extension, which is almost gearing that investment into more investment of different types, is also over time is declining. And these are the structural reasons why our growth is stalling. Our exchange rate doesn't need any explanation. We have, thank God that there is somebody called Trump that causes all kinds of volatility. And thank God that the Europeans don't know whether Europeans or not. And thank God that Theresa May is so useless that doesn't know where Britain should go. If those forces weren't in the global economy, our brand today would be, God knows, really fighting girls. Which in therein also is a little bit of good news. We are not the only nation in this crisis. So there is a virus in the globe that people do, especially if you're a political leader, you do crazy things. That for Britain to have such a low-level diplomatic, political intelligence was unthinkable. For Americans, with all their intelligence, to be able to only select the best that they could as a president is unbelievable. And equally unbelievable that for an ANC with its whole 100 years of political morality, the best that they could choose was. So they have a lot in common. Don't feel too bad. In the meantime, inflation is not going anywhere because there is no exuberance. Who wants to invest? If you have money, you rather be safe. And the rate at which our jobs are lost. In the mining sector alone, 130,000 men, and every day more jobs are lost, and therefore we had a huge unemployment problem. On a daily basis it increases, therefore consumer spend, disposable income is not there, and unless the economy grows not on a quarter-on-quarter basis, on a sustainable basis, we are not going to have consumer confidence to invest. Our rating agencies, global credit rating, done by the rating agencies, S&P, Fitch, and Moody's, is a split. Only Moody's is keeping us in a investment grade, but that's not going to last. If that split rating becomes consistent rating, junk rated, then we really see the, as they call it, currency loss. Because not only a lot of our current bondholders will not be allowed to hold our bonds, both private and public, but a number, in fact, all of our current institutions who hold our government and private sector bonds, they would have to withdraw it within 6 to 12 months. Others will come in, but they will come in at a different rate, on different terms, but the short-term consequence of withdrawal is going to be hugely problematic for the first 18 months. So a lot of you have currency exposure, or a lot of money that you don't know when you should do it. You know what. Growth, as I mentioned, we really gravitating around zero. Deficit in the balance of trade, not balance of payments, is in a way in our favor because we exporting a lot more than we are importing because our economy is not performing. But here is some of the global comparisons that are very, very important. Look at the actual premium that South Africa pays in terms of spreads. We are way ahead of Russia, Brazil. So in a way, we are already, as far as the capital markets are concerned, we are already junk graded. The only difference is that when the formal junk grading comes in, the capital has to leave the country. That's the only difference. What it will be consequence of for us. As far as the rating is concerned, we are junk graded. amongst comparison 10-year bond, we are in the category of Brazil and Turkey. And Brazil is just coming out of its recession. But importantly, Brazil is, I don't know how many of you follow the events in Brazil, they've got a project called Project Car Wash. It means clean the country from those who have captured the state. Up to now, there are 39, as of yesterday, 39 Guptas in prison. 2 previous presidents are in the court process. Whether they will be in prison or not, that will take time. But they have decided to clean the slate. It will take 10 years. But they have, much like South Africa, which has started, they started 3 years ago, Operation Car Wash in Brazil is the source of inspiration for a lot of people in South Africa. So I submit in the next 2 years, Brazil is going to come down in terms of its spread, in terms of its premium risk rate. Okay, these are really more statistics in terms of yield. Short-term money is still coming to South Africa because our interest rates in comparison with Europe and US is high. So if you're getting 0% in Europe and 8% here, you pay 3.5% to hedge it out, and you still go home with a real 3.5 to 4%. You don't have to work. We borrow 200 million there, sit at home, do a hedge in place, investment bank, bond or some other South African bonds. And that's a lot of people are doing. So the inflow of short-term capital to South Africa, which is underpinning our currency, is really a short-term market-driven yield differential, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. So don't get confused with the inflow of money. It's not as if they don't understand political risk, but they have basically hedged out the risk that is embedded in it. This is the biggest risk that South Africa has. This is a proportion of South African employees, not those who haven't got jobs. Those who have jobs in agriculture, almost 90% of them are below poverty line. In the mining, 23%. In manufacturing, 49%. And you can read the rest. I'm reading for those who may not be able to see it in the back. Total, with all these differences, total 53.8, call it 54% of South African employed workforce is living below poverty line. That is shocking. So if you feel a lot of anger, if you see a lot of frustration in the society, because even if you have somebody who's got a full-time job, back at home is supporting most probably on average 5 to 6 people. Food prices going up, petrol prices are going up, electricity prices going up, and the wages, when they want to increase, you and I say, what is CPI? It's 6%. In effect, we're telling them for the following next 12 months, you're going to live even worse than what you did the past 12 months, and the past 12 months wasn't a bed of roses for those who are in that situation. And we're talking about those who have full-time jobs. Okay. The obvious point to make that economic activity is not going to pick up until investment gets going. Investment is not going to get going until political uncertainties are settled. We have so far avoided credit rating. My guess is that the rate at which Minister of Finance, and I pray that in 2 weeks' time when he does his budget policy medium term, by that time he will be hammered with National Treasury technicians to talk the right language and to come up with a configuration that would give enough excuse to Moody's not to downgrade. If he doesn't, the writing is on the wall. The way he went about SAA's capitalization of short-term 3 billion is really the worst way that he could have shot himself in the foot, not South Africa, from his own credibility point of view. But that's the discussion for a bit later. Investment that was already mentioned is it's very low, but the government has to politically calm down from its high horses, because at the end it has to find a way to win back the private sector. And in that, and it's going to be a tough win back, because the private sector is like a gorilla. We've woken up and said, oh my God, I'm not going to push the run. And the other party has lost credibility, lost financial muscle. And this gorilla is not a very easy gorilla to, white or black. So the situation is going to get a lot more uncertain for the next 2 months, but that's will come to pass. That is my high-level understanding of where our economy is at. I don't know if you want to have any discussion. I'm also happy to stand with you and then.
Do we have any questions in the room? You brave souls. Oh, I'm in shock. So this is a crisis of confidence. Are we in a worse confidence level than we were, pre the end of apartheid, let's say early 90s?
Yes, we are, because the confidence that at that time, and I had the privilege of being at that time involved, the lack of confidence was on the part of a narrow sliver of our population, mostly white, and within the white, those whites who thought maybe the black government will do crazy things, will do this, and they're buying beans and all that stuff. Canned beans, you may not remember, but too young. They were building bunkers and all that stuff. But the majority of the population was excited. The majority of the population was looking forward to a peaceful, humane, and prospering future. And a lot of white people who were sitting on the fence, they were prepared to give the new dispensation the benefit of that. That was then, and then we had the entire global community well disposed towards us. Everywhere that you went, in the capital markets, in the analytic markets, in academia, in social activists, anywhere. So you had being a South African in 1994 and 95 was actually a very welcoming introduction. Today you have to put your head down, whether you're black or white, to say that the best that you could generate is human associations. So that confidence is, or lack of confidence, is what is different between now and then. The second difference at that time was that we knew we were going to be democratic, but we were looking, all of us, towards a uncertain future, looking forward to a new constitution. Now we are in a situation that we have had the constitution. We had nearly 10-15 years of benefiting from constitutional democracy in a positive way. But over the past 8 years, these institutions have been corrupted. So everybody says, how are we going to get ourselves out of this? The black population particularly is affected because that was their dream. The white population, obviously, protecting their wealth. Here is this disappointment, disillusionment, and uncertainty combined. Whereas in 1994, we didn't have disillusionment, we had only hope. And everybody was trying to do a little bit that they can to build this unknown, but sort of vaguely defined rainbow nation in some ways. Today, everybody is scared of each other. And in the black community, there is so much lack of trust. and so on and so forth. But then on the good side, we have now a constitution that can hold everybody to account, which we didn't. We have a judicial system that has proven itself to be world class, all accounts. So there's a lot of mixed picture. And what excites me is for those of you who haven't been convinced that I'm an activist, I believe every citizen, whatever you do, whether you're a business person, a cleaner, or an academic, doesn't matter. What we have in common is that you're a human being. You know what's right and what's not right. And if it's not right, we have to talk about it. Nobody's going to talk about it. We, you, and I have. And I'm very excited by the fact that there's a new, call it, broadly speaking, a social awakening, that I can't wait for ANC to do it for me, I can't wait for DA to do it for me, I can't wait for this business person or that political figure to do it. We all have a role to play. And that's the thing that I'm personally invested in, and banking. And deep down, I believe that by far the great majority of South Africans, black, white, Indian, colored, whatever, they are good people. They are not mischievous. They are not corrupt. They are not lazy, and so on. So I'm banking that under pressure, and nothing focuses the mind better than a crisis. And we are in a crisis. That's how I see it. Yes.
Just two quick questions, if I could. In your opinion, any ideas on who you think might win the election, the ANC election in December? And number two, do you think KPMG is going to survive the
I think we have three contenders for the elected Congress of ANC. If Ramaphosa does not nail it with 70% or 65% of support, then it will pan out that Nkosazana Zuma cannot do it, and Zuma's plan B, insurance, for those who are considering tax insurance, Zuma's insurance against imprisonment is well in place. So Zuma at the moment has got two horses in the race against Ramaphosa. When I talk to different people who are aligned to different of these racing horses, at the moment it's quite clear that Ramaphosa does not have the numerical number, although his supporters would like him to have, but he has extra party support, which is very important for ANC. This is a bizarre configuration. For ANC to win 2019, they require the foot soldiers of COSATU and they need the foot soldiers of SSP and SANCO. All of them have put their flag on Ramaphosa. And Ramaphosa is banking on that force to convince the branch representatives at the elected Congress to give him 65–70% unchallenged majority. And so that's where we are. My own view is that the Zuma camp has got too much at risk, so they put two horses in the race, and at the 11th hour, on the 22nd of December, you may find that Zweli will appear as a compromise unity candidate, together with either Sisulu as a deputy or someone else. That's how I see it, but it's really too early to be emphatic about it. As far as KPMG will survive. Simply because, again, in this diverse society that we have, the ethics is not consistent. And they will have to pay a price. They will pay a price. Most probably they will be halved by the time their business will be halved by the time the dust settles. because we just only started. IRBA has to come out, a few of them has to be struck off the roll as auditors, the firm has to get some penalty, but the real challenge will come when the market functions. They have over $1 billion revenue from government, from the public sector. I can assure you that for completely different reasons, not for ethical reasons, for unethical reasons, they lose that business. Because they've taken money and the guys. So they lose that. If they lose $1 billion, you know better than me what it means. They have to lose a few. They've already lost some high-level listed entities. And my own belief is that KPMG is going to lose a few more listed entities. So there will be another R500 million of revenue from dribs and drabs, private sector. I've done my little contribution to that. And I've done it because, not because I've got anything against KPMG. Because if the private sector does not use this opportunity to make its ethics known, then I can tell you it will be free for all. And that's my personal view. So, but KPMG will survive. It will not know. It won't be one of the four. So maybe you can reconfigure yourself, merge with another.
Any other questions? More over here.
Thank you. My name is Cassandra from Gateway Advisory. I have two questions. Firstly, why did you compare our country, I mean, you said it's not a perfect model, but you compared our country to Germany and not to Brazil, because I do think from an economic disparity perspective, we're closer to Brazil. And even in a political sense, I mean, I think they're a little further ahead in terms of their uprising and their consciousness versus ours. And the second question was, you put up a graph, and I think you said you were affiliated to the top line, so there was an IMF estimation of 1%, and in the line above it, your company, I think, has given us a projection of 0.5%, so a more conservative, or perhaps more negative outlook. In your words, I'd like to know why.
The reason I'm saying Germany is better from a political point of view is because Brazil will clean up its act, but it will not be a country of coalition government. Whereas when I look at DA, look at ANC, look at EFF, I don't see come 2019 any one of them grows or retains or attracts 51%. Much like Germany. Germany since 1970s, early 80s has been in a coalition government, so trying to learn how to be a coalition government, and when Merkel thought she nailed it, and she knows, and suddenly she lost 10%. Now back into a very sort of, I wouldn't say precarious, but not as stable a coalition. Now, for Germany, they've learned 30 years how to mix and match coalition government. Brazil has economic familiarity with us, or similarity with us, but from a political point of view, it's not. They are a lot more homogeneous than we are. One party or the other will dominate. We won't. We've seen it at our metros. We're battling to understand how a coalition government works. DA makes blunders as primitive as ANC. ANC is as childish as another DA, and we're learning. See, the theory of business is easy, but running a business successfully is a very different story than teaching it in a lecture. And ask me, I know. The same applies to politics. Politics is so easy in theory, but run a tight, coherent, consistent political party, even heavily messed it up. And messed it up so that politics 101 wouldn't have that. But they do. So that's where my comparison comes in. Why am I lower than others? I'm neither pessimistic nor optimistic. I look at the macro sector of the South African economy. At the moment, only agriculture and mining is performing. Every other sector is contracting. I look at forward and I see the public finance is going to get more desperate. It's going to borrow at higher rate. It's going to tax more, whether we like it or not. And SOEs are going to raise the level of contingent liability of the government dramatically. So when I put all of that into our macroeconometric model, what pops out is that at best we're going to grow 5%.
So what is the difference then? Why is the IMF raising us?
IMF, in my view, they are underestimating how much confidence is lost in the business sector. They're working with numbers. Whereas our growth, like any other growth, doesn't work that way. And if you don't believe me, it's a very simple test. If you go at IMF and World Bank and OECD over the past 3 years, every January they put a projection, every June they cut it down. Every December they revise it down. Never ever in the past 3 years in their quarterly projections have they either remained the same or revised it up. They have consistently revised it down. For example, when IMF team was visiting us in April, visiting South Africa, and for my sins, I'm one of the train stops at the train stops at certain places. IMF is always stops at our office and has a consultation. At that time, I was telling them that SOEs are far more hollowed out than you guys can to assume. They had a particular number for SAA, which was less than a third of the 14 billion that is required. They had a figure of positive for ESCOM. I thought that's nonsense. They had worked on energy prices going up at inflation plus 7%. Now ESCOM was almost double that, and so on and so on. So it's not that we're trying to be positive or optimistic or pessimistic. My view is that you have to be realistic. You have to work with actual what you have. I would love to have the economy growing at 5 or 6%, but it would be misleading myself and everybody else who listens.
And then another question on the SME sector. Do you agree with the view that it's the SME sector that will really drive job creation in South Africa? And do you think that sector is set up for success in the next years, or what can be done if it's not?
For those of you who remember the 1994 election, George Kretzler invented a new term in legal political language and said South Africa's election was sufficiently fair and transparent. So ever since then, we've really never had, to be honest with ourselves, never had a free and fair election, because a lot of, possibly as much as 15 to 20% of our population, and especially black population, does not have actual physical address to be on the electoral system, to make the system systemically free and fair. So yes, we've done the best we could, particularly at our national elections, to be free and fair. And for the sake of peaceful coexistence, we've agreed that it's sufficiently free and fair to be acceptable, to be legitimate. Now, but I think your question is more specific, and many people argue about this. Will Zuma and the crowd resort to distorting the independent electoral process? That they would want to do, I have no doubt. that EFFDA, civil society is alert to it, I also have no doubt. So I don't think they'll be able to subvert the total legitimacy of the election, but that they will try in some places, I also have no doubt. And those places are the places where the electronic system is not sufficient for having verified the actual addresses, the actual ID books, etc. Will the night before the election suddenly you have 1 million IDs very efficiently, the department becomes super efficient, and at the 23:55 minutes to becomes delivering it to the certain places? Yeah, they will do that. Will they be able to do it enough to affect the national? I think will be sufficiently free and fair to do that. As far as SME, at least this is my view, but everybody is focusing on that. SMEs, there's a lot of talk about SMEs, and it's one of the perennial issues of economic theory and practice. My view, for what it's worth, is South Africa is not yet set itself to support SMEs. SME in the 21st century is not about selling bananas by the roadside. It's about having a 21st century ICT policy which enables black and white, especially the younger generation, the millennials, XYZ generation, to explore different opportunities. At the moment, our ICT policy for 11 years has been sitting on 3 ministers' desks, and we haven't sorted it out. How do you expect ICT, how do you expect SMEs to flourish? If you go to other sectors, SMEs in financial sector is up against other regulatory requirements. Every time that you add regulation, you prevent SMEs. Somebody has to comply with some or other thing, but doesn't have the infrastructure legally, tax-wise, this-wise, that-wise, to survive. So, and then comes the corporate and, very importantly, the public sector, including state-owned enterprises. Their payment terms are the best way of killing SMEs. Government doesn't pay on time. Parastatals don't pay on time. Corporates don't pay on time. I won't mention names, but if you force me, some of those who are the open champions of free market and SME promotions, they are not paying on time. But they're paying the big guys on time, because the big guys have got the muscle to fight back. The medium, small guy hasn't. So who do we ignore? Their invoices. Who is most vulnerable? The small and medium, and so on. So I think there's a culture here which we need to break. Policy has to change, culture of business has to change. That's my view on SMEs. If we free our ICT policies, we will give birth to a whole lot of new opportunities.